Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we have episode 4, and we're going to talk about the wide receivers in Dynasty that you need to be trading away, avoiding, getting off of at all costs right now. And there's some guys that I love on this list, and it's going to hurt to talk about, but we're going to suffer together and get into it, guys. Let's go. Okay, guys, so let's get this first one out of the way because this one's going to hurt the most. And we're going to talk about Garrett Wilson. Wide receiver for the Jets, stud wide receiver, coming out of Ohio State a couple years ago, gets drafted inside the top 10, wins Rookie of the Year in 2022, and we think he's on the fast track to this Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb tier receivers. It doesn't really work out that way. The Zach Wilson experiment failed. Aaron Rodgers experiment, you could say, failed. Tears his Achilles on like the third play of the season, his first year there. Derails everything that we had hoped for Garrett Wilson that year. And it hurts, man, because I've been watching Garrett Wilson ever since he was in middle school. I played against him in middle school and high school. Watched him play at Ohio State. Best athlete I've ever seen in my entire life in high school. Just incredible. But the situation isn't great. Let's just be honest. Justin Fields is at the helm this year for the Jets. We already know Justin Fields, his limitations as a passer. It's not great. You have Aaron Glenn coming in, which I like, coming over from the Lions, but we know he's going to want to run the ball. He's going to want that to be their identity. You got Breece Hall and Justin Fields in the backfield. They're going to want to make that the main part of their offense. Even if Garrett Wilson gets peppered with targets and sees most of the volume there, I don't think it's going to be enough. I don't think they're going to throw the ball enough. I don't think that a lot of the targets are going to be very efficient, high fantasy scoring output targets, and it's just not overall great. Now I know people are going to say they're going to talk about the DJ Moore year that Justin Fields had, or the DJ Moore had with Justin Fields a couple years ago. And look, that season is incredibly hard to replicate. DJ Moore took so many screen plays, short yardage plays to the house that year for touchdowns. He was incredibly efficient, so many big booming plays, 50-point week. And while I think Garrett Wilson is absolutely capable of that, I'm not willing to bet on that again. Okay, that's an extreme outlier, and it's something that it's incredibly hard to replicate, and something I don't think you should be putting your money on, especially when you're drafting Garrett Wilson in startups. I think this could be Terry McLaurin all over again, unfortunately. We saw Terry McLaurin have no quarterback play his entire career, and then he has Jaden Daniels come in this year, and things changed. And maybe that happens with Garrett Wilson, and maybe they are really bad this year and they draft Arch Manning, and all this can go away. Okay. But for the time being, I'm out on Garrett Wilson. There's too many guys like Ted McMillan and Travis Hunter who he's going ahead of, who are just top 8 picks in the draft. Really good wide receiver prospects, going to be the number ones in their offense, or at least Travis Hunter won't be, but we all know what kind of talent Travis Hunter is. Whether you believe in him or not, you can't deny the talent. He's going ahead of A.J. Brown and Rashee Rice, which I think Rashee Rice coming off the injury is going to be, it may be questionable, but I mean, we saw what he did last year in a small sample size, and it was quite impressive. He's attached to Patrick Mahomes. A.J. Brown's A.J. Brown. He's phenomenal. Puts up fantasy points, about 17, 18 fantasy points every year. You know what you're going to get from him. So I just don't think I could pass on those guys for Garrett Wilson, at least at the moment. And I'm willing to pay whatever the price is come next year if he defies the odds and he is a top 10, top 8 producer this upcoming season. And if I am wrong, I am wrong. But to me, the cons outweigh the pros of the situation, and it's just not something I'm willing to bet on. Like I said, I love Garrett Wilson. I love the talent. And if we see kind of a Terry McLaurin type situation, I won't be surprised because he's incredible. We're just hoping for the best down the line. But for now, I'm out on Garrett Wilson, and I think you should move off of him for some other guys, like I just mentioned. And especially, I think in startups, you should be avoiding him at all cost, like I said, for the moment. Let's hope for the best for Garrett Wilson in the future. But for now, I'm out. Okay, so this next guy we're going to talk about is someone I feel quite the opposite about compared to how I felt about Garrett Wilson. And it's going to be Jameson Williams, the wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. And man, was everybody happy to see him break out last year? I'm sure all the truthers were. I'm sure all the Detroit Lions fans were, and players who had been holding on to Jameson Williams, especially considering how awful his first 2 years went. I mean, he was coming off the ACL injury, didn't play much his rookie year. Then he gets suspended with the gambling thing, and he looks like a total knucklehead. The coaches don't trust him. And finally, in year 3, he's able to break out. Ben Johnson was able to utilize his speed and space on shorter routes over the middle. and of course downfield. He was able to connect with Jared Goff a couple times for some big plays, and that led to some really big weeks in 2024. Now we fast forward to this offseason. Ben Johnson has now left for Chicago. Amon-Ra St. Brown is still there. He's still the man. Jahmyr Gibbs is maybe the best running back in the league. I mean, he sure looked like it last year. Montgomery's still there. Going to probably take about 15 carries a game. And we have to worry about Sam Laporta, the rookie standout, his first year, coming into his third year and looking to bounce back big time. Now, I don't think looking at all this, I don't think it's exactly a recipe for success and for JMO's outlook in 2025. Now, while I'm worried about the competition in this offense, I think it's fair to point out that JMO was incredibly efficient last year. He was awesome, 14 points per game, eclipsed 1,000 yards. But the only caveat is he only saw 91 targets. He didn't even get to 100 targets. He primarily works downfield as the field stretcher in this offense this year. And with the new offensive coordinator coming in, I'm just not sure exactly how he's going to want to utilize Jameson and exactly what his role is going to be. Now, while we love to see him turn into what we had kind of hoped he would, being the 11th pick out of Alabama a couple years ago, I think the same draft class as Garrett Wilson. But I just don't think if he takes a hit in efficiency and especially in volume, I don't think that his production is going to be what we hope it's going to be this year. And I think a lot of people are overlooking that, especially considering how flashy his production was down the stretch. The smartest thing I think you can do with Jameson Williams is, I'm sorry to say, try to move him for a future first. A 26 first, however you feel about the draft class, it's going to hold value. It's going to actually increase in value as the year goes on. As we get closer to the draft, if you can move him for a 2027 pick, that class looks to be stacked, man. Try to move him for that. And there's just some other guys that are going after him, like George Pickens and Jaden Higgins, where I think that you can get a plus on top of those guys that is good enough to move off of Jameson Williams. It's just the price is too good not to just cash out right now, and it's something I think that as smart dynasty players we need to look at more as these guys rise in value. And I think Jameson Williams is at his peak. Man, I think you should move off of him right now. It's sad to say, especially if you love Jameson Williams. I'm not a huge JMO guy, but if you are, I get it. I wouldn't hold on to him, though. Move off of him for some future draft capital, especially at first if you can get it. Players who are just as good are going to give you the same amount of production if you're competing, and just insulate yourself. Build down the line, continue to accumulate value on your team, and just keep this thing going. No need to hold on to a guy who has a ton of risk going into this next year. All right, let's keep the ball rolling right here, and let's talk about Jordan Addison, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings, going off the board about the 706, wide receiver 26, Keep Track Cuts wide receiver 22, and my wide receiver 27. So I know that my ranking is much closer to startup ADP and is much closer to where I think he should be, but I still think he's a little overpriced in terms of consensus. So let's talk a little bit about it. Now, the first thing I want to say about Jordan Addison is, man, he's a good player. We've seen it in his first years in the league. He belongs. 13 and 14 points per game is super solid, but he's just not a needle mover for me. It has seemed to be his ceiling in a crowded offense that consists of Justin Jefferson and is maybe the best wide receiver we've ever seen since Jerry Rice and Randy Moss. And we have TJ Hawkinson in this offense, who has been the tight end one in fantasy points per game in this exact same offense a couple years ago in 2023. He is going to be a full year removed from his torn ACL and tack on the looming suspension that Jordan Addison has going on right now. And I don't think that we're going to see the exact same fantasy output that we have his first years in the league. Now, the reality is, as well, is he's ran really hot on touchdowns. He has scored 9 and 10 touchdowns his first 2 years in the league. And I don't think that is a number that is sticky from year to year. Also, I just don't think that his target share in this offense is going to be enough to overcome that and be able to produce the same amount that some guys like, Devontae Smith and T. Higgins do in their offenses, because, you have an additional target like TJ Hawkinson at the tight end position, and they're just better players in general. And before you know it, we could look up and Addison is the number 3 option in this offense comfortably. And that is something I don't really want on a team where you have J.J. McCarthy coming in, who is basically a rookie quarterback after sitting his first season being hurt with Sam Darnold starting. And like we just talked about, he's going to be missing his first 2-3 games, and he's not going to be able to build that relationship with this rookie quarterback, and that's not a huge recipe for success. Now, some of the positives I'll talk about is with Jefferson, and with Hawkinson taking up all this attention, we can see Addison have some big weeks like we did last year. We saw Addison have a 40-point game, a 30-point game, and he can have some huge boom weeks, but the consistency, I just don't think is going to be there. And if we see a decrease in efficiency, in touchdowns, and in target volume in general, it's just something I'm not willing to bet on, especially at this price. Now, if you're looking to build for the future, grab a first plus, a 26 first, a 27 first, some insulated draft capital that you can build on for the future, or tier down to guys like Khalil Shakir, get a huge plus. Go down to Brandon Ayuk, who might play the same amount of games this year and could quite possibly be the number one wide receiving option next to George Kittle in his offense, where he doesn't have to worry about a third option being there as the target hog. Now, I don't even mind going from Addison and trying to get into a tier above him to guys like maybe Rashee Rice, like we talked about, A.J. Brown, who we know is phenomenal. We know what we're going to get from him year to year. And I think, you're going to look at age, especially with A.J. Brown, and we're going to say 27, 23 years old. I get it. But we're going to get 2-3 years out of A.J. Brown of elite production, and we'll be lucky to get that type of production 1 year out of Addison with Jefferson and Hawkinson there. Now, I love the player. I love the offense. I love the coach. But I just think the price is just far too high for me right now. And Addison is not enough of a needle mover for me to hold on to him and lose this value possibly, especially with the looming suspension and everything else he has going on in that offense. It's time to get ahead of these type of things and move off of these players down tier, up tier if you're in that type of position, and extend that success for your dynasty team and increase that window for years to come. So the next guy we're going to talk about is quite possibly my least favorite wide receiver going inside the top 50, and it's going to be Keon Coleman, the wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills, going at about the 10-10 as the wide receiver 47 in startups, and Keep Trade Cuts wide receiver 46. This is nothing against Keon Coleman. He seems like a great guy, super funny, fun personality, but there was zero things to point at in his rookie season that showed he is going to be a good, let alone okay, fantasy football wide receiver in his career. He was about as close to a face planter as a non-face planter could get. He caught 29 balls for 556 yards and 4 touchdowns in 13 games, averaging 8.6 fantasy points per game. This is very disappointing for someone who had plenty of opportunity and plenty of chances to take over as the number one in this offense as the year went on. As we know, Khalil Shakir has pretty much taken this role and ran from it as the target hog in this offense. And I just want to point this out. Not all of this is Keon Coleman's fault. The reality of the situation is he is forced to play a position that he is just not very good at and does not utilize his skills in the best way possible. The Bills front office and the Bills coaching staff has forced him to play this X wide receiver role, and he is just not a very good separator. And he is forced to go up against these physical corners where he's forced to get off press and create lots of separation, and that is just not how he wins. We were hoping that when he was drafted early in the second round last year, that he was going to be put in this big slot role that would be super ideal for him. Would get him in space where he wouldn't have to worry about getting off a press and creating tons of separation, where they could scheme up, different types of plays and get him, out in space a little more. But that's just not how things seem to be. They extend Khalil Shakir to multiple year contract, $60 million. And I think Keon Coleman's only path to big time production is catching double-digit touchdowns, similar to like how a Kelvin Benjamin won, but just not as good of a player. I will stand on this hill and suffer the consequences later if I am totally wrong about Keon Coleman. And I am open to the possibility of a player overcoming these certain types of circumstances, but just not with this one. I think Keon Coleman is complete dust, and he should not be going anywhere near the top 50. It blows my mind, some of the players he's going around right now and he's going ahead of at the moment. I mean, he's being taken ahead of Jack Besh, who was taken in the second round this year, who is actually someone who gets separation and who wins. Yes, he's in a more crowded offense, but he's a newer prospect, a newer face, and is someone I'm more willing to bet on than Keon Coleman. He's going ahead of Michael Pittman Jr., who we've seen put up nice fantasy points. Same with Jacoby Myers, Deebo Samuel, even though he's older, Juwan Jennings, Darnell Mooney at the same position. I mean, what are we doing here? At these prices, I'm completely out. I don't care about Keon Coleman. To me, at this moment, he is a roster clogger and someone I want to move off of as soon as I can. He's not someone I want to trade for, not someone I want to roster at the moment. And if I'm wrong, like I said, I'll take the L for that. do yourself a favor and stay away from Coleman in drafts. Don't take him in any trades unless he's basically a throw in, and I will get him off your roster as soon as possible. Whether you're competing, rebuilding, it doesn't matter. Don't hold. It's not something I want to bet on. Move to guys who have a higher possibility of, breaking out or producing in fantasy. He could become a roster clogger like big time this time next year and is someone you need to move off of if you can get him for absolutely anything right now. As much as we all love him, seems like a great guy, but just not someone I'm in on at all. Now, that is going to be all for the list today, guys. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for watching. But let me know, are you holding some of these guys? Are you selling them like me? And give me some input. How can I improve? All input is good input. Doesn't matter what it is. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Later.